Welcome to another edition of Mortgage Talks. I'm your host, Adam Hires. Remember to download your free business transformation playbook, 12 weeks to transform your business. You mortgage loan officers, you need this out here. It's going to ask you the right questions. You're going to dial it in. Right now, you're in the fourth quarter. You need to keep on trying to grow. A lot of times right now you're coasting in, or oh my goodness, or I can't do any more and I'm already done, etc. Well, let's go ahead. Don't even wait for the new year. Get in there and say, what am I going to do for the next 12 weeks? Don't worry about those yearly goals all the time. That's a great forecast for later, 5 years out. Grow the vision, get energy out of it. I talk about powerful, and the first one is getting energy, and that a lot of times is your vision and your why. So that's great, but you need to dial it into 12 weeks and just say, hey, this is what I'm going to do for the next 12 weeks. Like I used to, when I was a power lifter, I didn't worry about so much as what I was going to do a year from now. It was, what am I going to do for the next competition and the next 12 weeks to grow and get stronger and blow out the competition. That's what you want to do. So blow away your competition. Download your free business transformation playbook today. All right, we have an awesome, amazing guest on here, high level. We got Joe. I want Joe to introduce himself and talk a little bit about what about himself and what he knows. And I'll tell you what, you want to listen up. High level stuff coming down the pike on this one.
What's up, big man? How you doing?
Man, any better? I just couldn't stand it.
I appreciate you having me on. So, yep, my name is Joe Semaan. I'm glad to meet you and the rest of your audience. Much like, a lot of us out there, I've had, a lifelong career in sales, originally from the Midwest, although I live in California now. I've been out here for 18 years. And, your first half of your career in sales, if you were really, really pursuing a proper career in sales, you're going to have your fair share of ups and downs, right? Yeah. And you're going to hop around a few industries as well, typically, unless you're lucky enough to meet a mentor like yourself, get guided into, the big ticket industries, such as the mortgage industry and a few others out there that are, they're going to be around for a while. You don't have to worry too much about that. And I came out here and kind of an overnight decision, coming off of career or a job in sales. If you guys remember, after 9/11, I was working in the tech sector at the time, working for an ERP consulting type firm. And I was one of the youngest guys in sales in that industry out in Chi-Town. And when 9/11 hit, about 90,000 people got laid off in the tech field in Chicago. So here I am out there, trying to compete for work with these guys that have 20, 30 years experience and are willing to work for the same wages. Didn't work out so well. So after about, 5 or 6 months of working 3 jobs, you'll love this one, Mike. I was working as a customer service manager for a benefits packaging company during the day. I was doing personal training at Bally's at night, 5-6 days a week. And I was also mentoring kids on the weekend with this company that I had met. And I had racked up so many bills while working in tech, I was still living paycheck to paycheck. You know how it goes when you're young and making money. And so I got a random phone call from a buddy of mine, college buddy of mine who had moved to California. And he painted this picture of like palm trees, poodles, babes, and money. And I went to sleep that night. I woke up the next morning. I looked at 2 things. I looked out the window. It was 9 degrees outside with ice everywhere. And I looked in my bank account and I had like $500 in there. And I said, shit, I'm out of here, man. I am out of here. So I jumped in a car that my brother gave me. He was about to get rid of because mine got repoed the month before. That's always fun when a guy shows up to your house at 11 o'clock at night with a Glock on his hip. So I drove out here, man, and I met some people, random people. I slept in my car for about 4.5 months. Eventually picked up a few jobs, and then I met some people actually in the mortgage business. And it was during that sort of boom that we had, that 2002, 2003, 4, 5, that I was, fortunate enough, blessed enough to get promoted to a director level position, again, still in my 20s. And I started to become a little bit honest with myself about what I was seeing in the sales environment. The common denominators in the sales environment were the majority of the people who have great potential end up with average performance. And the people who really kill it in sales are usually a handful. They're usually a handful. And I was also starting to notice that sales agents were jumping around. They would go into a job really excited. And within 6 or 7 months, if they didn't make good money, they would become discouraged. Now you got 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Then they would hop to the next nest, and it would happen all over again. And then I noticed I'm also a director. So I have to train the people. I have to develop the people. And it just kind of dawned on me while attending all these motivational seminars and all these things that we were all into, that very rarely did I see a sales team where the majority of the people were doing extremely well in any industry, let alone the mortgage business, which is booming right now. I mean, it doesn't take that much to close a deal, but we have to be careful in these boom economies, because in boom economies, you know what happens to skill set? It goes down, because who doesn't want a 2.5 interest rate, right? And so I was noticing all these things happening, Mike, and in 2006, at the January 2006, after my biggest month ever, I think my team, I had just under 100 people on our floor on our team at that time. And I forget how many units we did, but I said, hey, while I'm ahead, while I'm kicking, while I'm fairly popular, I want to go out and see if I can contribute, if I can find out what these missing components are. Why do myself and a handful of others in every company do so well, but other people who have just as great personal skills as I do not do so well in the sales game? And that kind of began, my journey of wanting to find out, what is it that I don't know? What is it that we don't know, so that I can help, develop more and more people. And that's kind of, what led me here. That was what, almost 15 years ago. It'll be 15 years this year, and I had really nice hair back then. That's gone too.
I understand.
Yeah, so that's where we're at now. And ever since then, I've had the opportunity now in over 20 industries to mentor. I think we're coming up on over 400 sales-based organizations now.
Wow.
And along with that, many leadership teams as well. So it's been quite a ride, man. Been quite a ride.
That's awesome. So I'm guessing you have a real passion for helping people grow in just the sales. The sales game, right? I mean, it's it's a beautiful thing to be an influencer and be able to navigate and get your way a little bit, right? Make great income. And there's not about trickery, right? Like I always tell people, high level sales is not about tricking. It's just navigating people to the direction where they probably should have been anyway. And that's really love, honestly, because if you take someone that it's going down a path that they shouldn't, and you can wake them up and go down the right path, I mean, that's a beautiful thing. So a lot of people take sales as this negative connotation, but sales as its truest form is one of the most beautiful things out there, because it's taking somebody before they're about to have a heart attack and selling them, and to go ahead and to start investing in themselves and their body and living a longer life. It's all these things that what sales can do, depending on what organization they're in. In the mortgage industry, it's obviously sales to take those deals on and do the best job you can, and when you're talking to real estate agents, right, you're selling them on you can close their deals, and you can communicate properly. All those things, which is just high level communication, absolutely can make you a ton of money. But it's really serving and putting service first, and just letting people know what you do, how you do it, how you perform, and
right. Man, you nailed it. And you know what? There's no way you're going to have a lot. I remember when I first jumped over into, it was a huge shock to everybody, because who makes, tens and tens of thousands of dollars a month, and then all of a sudden goes, I'm going to be a coach, Like you're supposed to ride the wave. And sometimes I wish I did, but I remember a couple of the FSRs from the Tony Robbins company approached me and were trying to recruit me and say, why don't you just come work with us? And I was stubborn. I was a little defiant. I didn't want to do that. And the main reason, number one, what I was getting at was, they said, dude, if you can make it 10 years, then you'll be somebody. Said, if you can make it 10 years and not shift into another industry and not have a secondary income and not, and just coach, then you will, then it show. And what I've noticed is what gets you to that point is the best mentors have an overwhelming energy of care for other people. And I know that's true because I've literally had administrative assistants chase me out into parking lots, waving checks going, you keep leaving these here. You've got 3 pay periods of checks for coaching here. You keep leaving. Oh man, I forgot, damn it. Right? And that's maybe my Achilles heel is maybe it's the money part. But, I've noticed, and I came up with the saying, I'm like, especially for sales agents going into the new economy that we're in right now, or what I like to call the domination economy, because 2 things are happening simultaneously. I know you're seeing this too. And you probably saw this a while ago too. I noticed this actually about 8 years ago when we were recuperating from the last recession. I noticed that people were being sold 1,000 times more. And I noticed that sales agents were sounding more and more alike, which is what inspires customers to shop instead of choose their loyal partner. If everybody used the same language in your industry, let's call the industry dating. If everybody used the same language and everybody offered you the same benefits and everybody consulted you the same way and everybody asked you the same questions and everybody pitched similarly and everybody used tie downs and everybody read the same sales books and everybody read the same authors, then eventually we would all start sounding the same. And if you sound the same, how are you going to demonstrate value? With your website? No. And so I found that people say customers are shoppers. What I find, Mike, is that we have actually, I love it when, my single buddies talk about women these days. I'm like, well, maybe we made them that way. And then we say customers these days. And I'm like, well, maybe we made them that way. Because when I grew up doing a mortgage or getting insurance or whatever, buying a car, you talk to the guy at church that my dad knew, or you walk down, there's an office down the street that you went to your bank and you asked for Pamela. Pamela would help you with you know what I'm saying? And so they always ask me, why customers shop so much these days. And I'm like, it's because it's really difficult for the customer to tell a significant difference in communicating with you versus communicating with the other guy. And the more and more you sound alike, the more the customer has no choice but to shop by price. What's your take? What are you noticing out there?
I love that. I just, I think I said this on maybe the last podcast or the one before, where somebody was just bringing it, right? And it's, a lot of people are waiting to talk. I was not waiting to talk. I was just soaking that in, because that was very deep, very succinct to what I talk about. And anybody's listening, I hope that you please out there take that to heart. And if you get nothing else from this podcast, that right there was a game changer, because absolutely, I see that, right? Like, you're absolutely right. Are you differentiating yourself from every other mortgage loan officer, every other entrepreneur that's in every other real estate agent? What are you doing? Yeah, you're using just all the same languaging. And I tell you, like, I honestly am nauseated by it most of the time, because it's like the same things. Like, I have real estate agents on my page, and it's like they all have one meme for the next 3 weeks, and you're like, right? It's like, oh gosh, right? But the same pitches, the same things you're saying, and it's like, can we get outside of the box? Can we think for ourselves? Can we do things that are different, that people don't just see the same again? And then when you don't differentiate yourself, then price becomes the big overriding factor, and you never want to put yourself in that position, because I don't know about you, but I never want to be the lowest price in town. Like, that's just not, I don't want to be the lowest price. Like, I'm not saying I need to be the highest price, but when you're just going, but the whole point is, when you're the lowest price and that's what you look at, that's what you're focused on, then the value ends up not being the real the real forefront of your business.
Yeah.
And so
And if the customer keeps reverting, it's like sales agents will, I've listened to thousands and thousands of recorded phone calls.
Yeah.
And customers sort of have this like patience window.
Yep.
And one of the indications that you are not creating a unique experience or a value-based experience for your customer is when they randomly stop out of context and ask you questions about rates, pricing, guarantees, quotes, ballpark figures, etc. It's the customer's intuition telling you, I know how this goes. I know where you're headed. You're going to try to lock me down. You're going to try to run my credit, or you're going to try to get a payment from me, or whatever the industry, jargon is. And I'm like, you have to understand, listen, those are clues that your customer is either going to resist, walk away, or price shop. And companies have to be careful, because when I go into a company, I think, the average high performance sales floor, closes around, especially in the mortgage business, closes around 18 to 20% of their qualified customers, which raises a question. Because then I see companies start to reward people when they're closing 24, 25. So let's say you got, I do, let's say 12 units this month, and that guy does 14. Well, he gets called the top producer. I'm like, why are you calling that guy a top producer? Both of these guys are practicing and perfecting a method that loses 75% of their qualified business. That should raise a question. And we create a cultural ceiling. So now when I'm going in, I'm like, look, man, when we're listening to conversations, as soon as we hear these indicators, that are going up, like you mentioned, you shouldn't be the highest. You shouldn't be you shouldn't be based on price alone. Because ultimately what we're trying to do is help the customer to realize or reach a point of clarity that whatever the decision that we're going to make together is, right, puts you in a forward position, allows you to make the progress that you wanted to make in your life in this particular area of your life, right, or business, because we do B2B too. And if you can reach that point, the customer is less likely to be concerned about pricing or rates, as long as there's an overwhelming, compelling reason for them to move forward. And when I find people are differentiating themselves, I find they want to differentiate themselves with their company, their relationships, their lender relationships, what type of broker, we're direct. We've heard it, bro. We've heard it.
Right.
There's nothing you can say that makes you different than the next. We shop, we get the lowest rate. We do it in volume. What else can you say, bro?
Right.
What else can you say? Nothing. So then they want to differentiate themselves by company or reputation or online reviews. Those things are important. But if you're shifting to those things as the reason your customer should do business with you, you're actually putting them back in thinking, shopping, procrastination mode, because now there's homework to do. Instead of, I'm sure at this point in your career, we probably have so many overlap, because when you talk, I'm like, exactly. And when I'm talking, I can hear you go, exactly, right? It's not in the product. It's not in your banking relationship. It's not in, you need to have those things. You have to continue to improve the infrastructure and the relationships that your company has so you can leverage for business.
Yeah.
But what we're talking about is the level of quality communication and having a deeper understanding of all the underlying factors that put your customer in a position to where they feel like they are making the best decision for them, for whatever role they play in their family, for however they want to feel when they're done with the phone call, for what's happening in their near future, for what they've experienced in their past, for you name it, right? There's a lot of people who understand this, from the Bezos to, you name it, that 95% of your conversation is only getting to know the circumstances, the priorities of your customer.
Yeah.
And I find that, with experienced guys like you and I and a few of the others out there roaming around right now that are doing good for people, I find that that's the determining factor between whether or not a customer remains loyal to you and just moves forward without hesitation, or feels that, yeah, but you're in an industry where I've been told I made mistakes in the past and everybody tells me the same thing, and I just need a couple of days to do my diligence. It's like a fork in the road. you're my man. Like I have t-shirts that say, become the one. Become the one for your customer. Become their trusted decision-making partner. Not to be confused with the most educated in the industry.
Right.
Two different topics. And man, it's great. That's why I said earlier, I'm like, dude, if you and I and maybe 6 or 7 others that, have, respectable, passionate careers and mentoring and coaching and helping were to just sweep the nation, if we just took one industry, like if we just took the mortgage industry, you know how long it would take us to like reach out to everybody?
Yeah, right.
It'd probably take 2 lifetimes.
Yeah.
That's why I love having conversations with other mentors and other coaches. People, well, don't you guys do the same thing? Well, yeah, kind of. Well, then why do you guys partner up? I'm like, because there are tens of millions of you.
Mhm.
No army has one general.
Yeah.
And I'll say this, like, and this is anybody listening, you're at a higher level of sales than I am. Not just by this conversation, you can tell how you've done the work. You really understand what it takes to move people from a non-decision to a decision. What's going behind that? You understand at a really high level. If anybody is listening to this is not getting that, it's probably because you have a lot of work to do in your sales game. Really, if you don't understand how much depth what has been said here and how much depth you can tell that Joe has, definitely at a higher level of sales than I. So I'm loving it because this is what I love. I love to learn because if we were working with a client, for example, and this is where I always look for, hey, is there a possibility to collaborate? And what is there to do? And how can I learn? Always, 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 because there's better people in certain aspects of even inside your coaching sometimes. Like for example, I'm coaching a mortgage loan officer, right? Like you are more dialed in to probably helping someone overcome a price objection than even I am, because you can tell how much work you've done in that. Now, could there be certain aspects of where I'm setting up somebody's day that I could help them maybe more, or they would understand it more coming from a loan officer, et cetera. There's a lot of things we can talk about here, but what I say is absolutely is that wherever somebody is in their game right now, they may be better suited for someone like yourself, just at this point, and then, or maybe they were me at one point, but depends on where they're at their game. And there's no reason why people can't collaborate. But I love learning this stuff because what you're saying, I'm tracking, and this is the way I think as well. But you can tell it's at a deeper dive of what you've been doing. So when I listen to this, I'm like, man, I can just tell if he got a hold of even myself, you would take off some of those rough patches, right? You'd listen to those calls and you'd be like, hey, here's identify this.
Both ways.
Right.
My clients ask me all the time. They're like, hey, we're thinking about, attending this person's workshop, or we're thinking about going to 10X, or we're thinking about, right? And they're like, should we go? And I'm like, of course you should go. Why wouldn't you go?
Right.
Like, what if you pick up half a dozen things that I would have never thought about? And then you can make more money that way. I don't follow this, like, be loyal to, or that, it's great to have a quality relationship with people and to continue to service them. But, I'm with you. I'm like, if you and I and 2 other guys are sitting somewhere and I hear you and I'm like, oh man, it makes so much sense. I would have never thought of that. Like one of my clients said one time, and I also have this type of understanding with other mentors as well, as he said, I feel like, he said, listen, man, don't take this, don't let your head grow. My head is already big enough with these guys, and we always make fun of each other. He's like, don't let your head grow. But he goes, I feel like if we didn't bite the bullet and decide to drop our egos a little bit and bring in you and a couple of others and just learn by experience, which experience is the slowest way to learn in the new economy. He goes, it would have probably taken me 4 or 5 lifetimes to have uncovered the type of knowledge that you guys bring in, because we have profound knowledge. I mean, you can own 2 or 3 companies but we've been to hundreds. And so that exponential learning allows us to see and anticipate what works and what doesn't work. You know, and I love telling my people, I'm like, look, man, I'm like 1 hour of us learning and studying and practicing together is equivalent to about 90 days of experience. Now, how many leads would you have bought in 90 days?
Right.
What would your CPA be? You know, so when I team up, man, I feel like if you and I were walking around, just you being by my side, I know nobody's messing with us. So I feel like if you were with me, I could talk as much shit as I wanted to talk. Right? And I do just enough. Of course. So yeah, I'm with you, dude. I'm like, you know, now I will tell you one thing. Like I will tell you in 2007, 2008, which I hit rock bottom while in my coaching career, because, and it was another wake up call. And this is really important for anybody in sales, anybody who's training, any director or owner of a company. What I realized was my popularity didn't last, because given how rapidly the economy was changing and customers' needs were changing, my skills were no longer wow factor skills, and that I needed to adapt. And so my business went down to the point where I would be lucky to have like 1 or 2 companies on board every month, because I go every week, boom, 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 every week until we see the results, right? Like a fitness trainer. And I you know, there was one night where I was literally I had just had to leave my home to the bank, and here I am 3 months later in an apartment here in Irvine, and now I've got an eviction notice on my door because my roommate, you know, got let go from his job too. If you remember how it was, is we forget so quickly as people. 2007, 2008, it was chaos, man. There was loan mods, foreclosures, all kinds of stuff was happening, and I was getting evicted. I remember, you know, being in the shower one night, and I finally told the story, you know, just about a year ago, I started telling it. And I'm like, out of nowhere, I just collapsed into tears in the shower because I was in such denial that I'm like, I provide value, you know, people are stupid out there, you know, they need coaching. They're so resistant. They're so stubborn. And then I'm like, no, bro, you need to get better.
Yeah.
You need to get better. There's a lot of people out there that like you. And when money's flying in the air, they don't mind paying you. But they have to pinch every penny right now. So what can you bring? And it was just a major wake-up call. And right then and there, the reason I went to that story is because I stopped reading anything that had to do with sales. I stopped studying anything that had to do with sales. I stopped following a lot of sales mentors. I stopped reading books that were written in the 80s and 90s. Because at the same time, I was listening to the handful of clients that I had and their sales teams. And what I noticed was, like I mentioned before, customers were starting to memorize and adapt to the words that we use when we're on the phone. They had caught on, because we had just gotten to the point for the first time ever where we had been selling these things by phone for the first time in history for like 8 or 9 years now. And then we also got to the point where small and medium-sized business owners got very, very proficient at popping up offices, putting up cubicles, popping in phones and buying leads. Lead guys were loving it. Like I say out here in California, every Mike, Joe, and Ali had a mortgage office, right? And their brother too. And I was like, oh my gosh. Like I'm listening to these phone calls, and I was walking into companies, and I was literally, I would role play with a company how I think they took their calls my first day in their shop. And then I'd be like, how many of you say this? How many of you ask that? How many of you say this in your intro? How many of you leave voicemail? How many of you close this way? How many of you build benefit? How many show savings like this? And people just raising their hand. Like, how do you know? I'm like, because you all sound the same. And that's why your customer's shopping you. It's too difficult. Who do I marry if every date seems the same?
I love it.
I can't tell. And so I stopped studying sales, and I started studying deeper psychology, not just NLP and all that other commercial stuff, but literally there happened to be tons of reports coming out on Gallup, on Forbes, on Harvard, on all these things. And I would read all these case scenarios, and then you have to decode them. Like, well, if they're experimenting, they're learning certain things about human behavior and how the brain works and how it's changing right now. Like, what does that mean in sales? And so there's this decoding process. And I used to joke around with clients and be like, all you guys do is pay me to test stuff. Right? And so forth. And obviously, we learned together, but it was amazing, dude, over the past 10 years, how much customer sensitivities have evolved, how much access to information they have. And you've probably seen this 1,000 times, that when all we're doing is transferring information to them, right? Numbers, rates, we're educating them on how their loan was underwritten and why they don't qualify, or what I was able to do and what they have to pay in order to get this. And here's a big takeaway. I find, and this is not in all industries, sometimes when it's B2B or a technology-based industry, the rules change. That's why, I'm creating something. I'd love to get your feedback when we visit together, but I've created something called the new rules of selling. And one of the new rules of selling is the rule of educate your customer. Controversial topic for me. Yeah. Because educate your customer, that rule was created prior to the information age. Mm-hmm. And I find that now when you over-educate your customer on how they qualify and what the DTI is and what this means and what this places them as and what and how you're literally underwriting, I tell the sales agents, I'm like, are you training your customer how to be a loan officer? Because you're making them so intelligent. It's okay to make them intelligent. I want them to be intelligent about their decision, not how our industry works. Because what you're doing now is you're inspiring them, you're giving them the confidence to go out and have all this language to use with other people. You're boosting their confidence to shop instead of just guiding them to the decision that's best for their family. And that happens in our industry all the time. Or at least in that industry. Right? So there's all these things happen, man. I wish that sometimes I wish, we should have like a series that we should do part 1, part 2, part 3.
Man,
in this 30 to 45 minutes, you and I can cover this.
Sure, man, I'm telling you, I am. This is not BS. Like, I hope everybody understands. It's not BS. I am thoroughly just blown away by the conversations and how we sync up, but you're doing it at such a high level. You can just tell and I love that, man. Yes, absolutely. I could talk about this for a long time. You can absolutely tell that you know how to move people down the right path. And again, a lot of people are just talking to be talking. It's like, my Uncle Joe can sell. He talks all the time. It's like, your Uncle Joe can't sell crap, okay? It's been, he talking all the time is not what sells people. It's asking the correct questions. It's knowing when to talk and how to move that needle and how to move the feelings to buy, to purchase. And you absolutely hit it as far as education. I was actually on this one, they had, different speakers. It was for mortgages. And this one loan officer gets on there, and she was educating everybody, or she was doing this class. And she's like, all these loan officers around my, area, they don't tell them, they don't go through all the details and with their clients. And you need to tell them all this. She's going through all this stuff you tell the clients. And I'm like, oh, I can't even watch this. Like, I was nauseated. I was like, you're crazy if you think that that's what you need to tell people. What do they look at you like then? You're just looking at you like just deer in the headlights. Like, why did you tell me all this information? Like, I'm not going to be a loan officer. I just need to know what the pertinent details and move them down that path. And guess what? If you open yourself up to, for me, what I've always found is the biggest key is reiterating the fact that, hey, I'm open for questions when you have them. We have a good connection. So that's it.
Tell them what they need to know. Tell them how it works.
Yep. And it's like if you have the comfortability around you're able to ask me questions, I don't need to tell you everything. I need to move you down that path, and then there you go. And I'm trying to remember what else you had in there that was so good. But yes, definitely being different, like you said. You went on a bit about how just be different, and people right now again they're doing the same old thing, same jargon, and it's like for loan officers they go to these, especially pre-COVID, right? They're going setting up these real estate office meetings. And it's like, here's the FHA mortgage, and we do the 3.5% down with it. It's like, does anybody care about that? The real estate agents care about that? Not really. The ones that really care so much about those loans are not the ones you want to work with anyway, because they're not actually selling homes really. So you're just being like everybody else. We have the great rates, we have the great service, and they're like, okay, cool, that's what I heard, and like, I'm glad that you provided this lunch. And so being far different. So for me, I always went in and I was coached. Like I'm not talking to you about mortgages. Like you can ask me a question you want about it, but here's how you run your day. Here's how you negotiate. Here's how here's a sales technique. Here's this. To help people grow their business, something that's different. That's beyond anybody else. So one question, I want to ask you. One of the biggest things I see loan officers struggle with is, and salesmen is, in general the same way, is obviously making that first call. What's your suggestions? How should they call? Say it's a cold call. Like what should your initial conversation be? Maybe your mindset, anything you want to speak to if a loan officer is going to call a new real estate agent, for example.
Right. So if I'm working with a team, especially right now, I actually have a mortgage client that has been off and on with me for about 6 years now. And what they're doing right now is they're building, there's a lot of companies out there who are realizing if you can afford it, there's great opportunity in hiring people green, training them as openers. And then for the ones that perform well, you help them get licensed and you help them develop their career. So we've got a lot of that going on right now. And they'll call on age data. They'll call on people we spoke to last year. They'll call on people that, they've never heard from, depending on what their data sources are. And if there were one thing that I constantly say to these managers and these other trainers that I work with, is that if you can get your sales agents, your openers, to keep a significant number of people on the phone for more than 60 seconds, you're going to boost their confidence and they're going to make more calls. But if you're operating by another old school rule, or you're only one no away from a yes, be careful. You're teaching them that rejection is okay. We don't need a bunch of yeses. But so the way I attack it is this. Along the way, I mentioned to you psychology. So I've tried, dozens of types of linguistics in the beginning of phone calls, tonality changes, and so forth. Like we don't mention the name of our company, because if your company is an unknown company, it's a sales pattern, and it's going to lead to no thank you. In many cases, we don't use an upbeat tonality. I use what we call a parental tonality, because it sounds like an important phone call. We even use the word important. State the obvious. Hey, Mike, good afternoon. I'm glad you picked up the phone. My name is Joe. You weren't expecting this phone call, but it is kind of important. I noticed that you boom, and then whatever it is that we're setting the expectation for. Then the customer is going to be curious. I just got to second base. Well, who are you with? Well, I'm with so-and-so. It's actually the first time we've met. But again, I'm reaching out because I noticed A, B, and C about your property. And I was wondering if you had done anything this month or reached out, because it looks like you might be eligible for X, Y, Z. And if you're not, then at least you get it? So, and then when you compare, language like that to other people in the mortgage business, you're like, oh, that's not what we say. We say rates are lower than ever. Have you gotten a quote? What's your rate right now? Or If I could save you a couple $100 a month, is that something that you'd be looking into? Or I'm working with somebody else. Well, let's try to beat it. There's all this genre, and you're going to nail some that way.
Right.
You're going to nail some, but they don't bring us in to do the numbers they're already doing.
Right.
There was one call center in the Philippines that was calling on mortgage clients, and I'm just focusing on that because I know that's your ball game. And I think they went from like a 1% or whatever conversion ratio to like 2.9 in 3 days, which was more than double the number of transfers. And it was simply by changing their first 3 or 4 sentences.
Yeah.
That was it, and then I just sent the invoice right over.
I love what I love what you say. So tonality is right. That's huge. Like two people can say the same thing, but different tone. I've coached this actually before, and this is what I'm putting together my sales book actually for mortgage loan officers. And tone is one of those things like I talk about being excited. It can really cost you a lot of sales, right? Like now, that doesn't mean you can't be excited a little bit internally, but when you externally show excitement off the bat, that creates sales resistance because they're like, whoa, right? What's going on? You're like, hey, buddy, Joe, what's going on? You're like, who's this guy? Right? Yeah. So I'm excited now, but like when I talk to, it's that very, it's serious tone, get to the point pretty quickly, and then, try to ask the correct questions as we go and evolve that conversation. But I always say, you have to be very careful when you show excitement. It's, if they get excited, you can get excited with them, or you try to get their heartbeat up just a little bit once in a while. You're like, but you have to be very selective about it and really think about when you're doing that. Because if you're just because I think everybody goes back to that whole, the 80s books or whatever, like be excited, the more excitement you have, the more sales you get. It's like, maybe internally you need to be excited, obviously, because you need to be excited about what you're doing.
Sure.
Externally, that will cost you a ton of sales.
Right. Especially in what I call, important consultative selling, which means like things that impact your reputation as a provider, mortgage, insurance, investments. These are things that, your father-in-law talks to you about. These are things that your wife asks you about. These are things, it's different than walking through the mall and somebody with a curling iron jumping at you and being like, hey, let me see your hair real quick. You know what I mean? Or showing you one of those, man, I was at the mall one time, this guy convinced me to put those muscle things on, those electro, whatever. Man, that thing scared the shit out of me, dude. So it's okay for him to be excited, and compliment you and jump out and retail. So there's different scenarios. But in high level, high ticket type consultative selling, you and I have noticed that you maybe a minute or two in, that's when you start to jive with your customer a bit. There was this massive company I was working with earlier this year for like 3 or 4 months, and they're pretty well known out there across the country. And I was making a joke in the initial workshop where I kind of break the ice with the sales team, and I said, whatever you do, do not ask the person about the weather. And everyone was like, oh damn. And I'm like, I don't mean don't ever say it. I mean, it shouldn't be in your intro.
Wow.
Small talk. The best line I have with my coach was small talk makes you small.
Yeah.
Small talk makes you small. And I think that really is true, because it's like, well, how's the weather? It's like, did you really call?
Yeah.
Now we both know that's not why you called me. So,
bring it up at a point in the conversation where it's actually relevant.
Right.
Where you're verifying the person's address or something, and you're like, oh, really? How long you been out there for?
Yeah, exactly.
What's it like out there right now? You see what I mean? Not right. As your opener. And so there's always what we call sounds of selling. There's also really cliche ones like absolutely and perfect and great, and all those words that we don't realize are fillers. But here's something great takeaway for the audience. And, I try to take things that I notice, and I love to put them into easy to understand context, because I hate it when people get all fancy and psychological. And I'm like, words are the code to the brain. Words have associations with them, and they have previous experiences associated with them. And so there's a lot of even like, fillers that we say, like, absolutely, or, I'll see what I can do for you, or, perfect, yeah, or great, somebody gives you their phone number. Let me just verify your phone number. And you're like, perfect. And I pause it. And I'm like, why is getting their phone number perfect? I'm like, literally, we're 90 seconds into the conversation and I've identified 19 sales patterns. I guarantee you, in 60 seconds, this person's gonna say, I don't wanna give you all my information today. All I want is a ballpark figure. I need to see if this is even worth it before we go through all this work. I guarantee you. Look, well, they all say that, because you always say that. People are reacting to your communication. Now, if you avoid those patterns, if I throw a new punch that you've never seen before, you don't know how to block it. And so the mind isn't going to react. It's going to be intrigued. It's kind of like a woman saying, I don't know, there's just something so different about him. It's a unique experience.
No, you are right for sure. Like I don't know if you ever read Ty Bennett stuff. He's storytelling, power of storytelling. And one of the lines I love in that book is he said, if it's not important to say, it's important not to say. That's what reminds me when you said, when you're saying those filler words, or when you're talking there, if it's not important to say, it's important not to say. So absolutely, I love that. There's so much to take away from just everything you just said. But that is a big thing. What's important not to say. So yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a lot of, we miss all the time, and that's a beautiful thing. That's what I love about it, because it's just like I always talk about when I was powerlifting and my hamstrings. I found out my hamstrings were weak. I was freaking ecstatic, and because then I was like, well, if I can make my hamstrings stronger, my squat and deadlift are going to go up. And then lo and behold, I hammered them, and for like 6 months, and then I never missed a lift because of my hamstrings ever again. They were actually my strongest point of my body ever. It's still this point. If I don't ever miss a lift because of hamstrings. And it's the same thing with sales, and just being very open and honest, and letting somebody dial in and say, this is what you're doing, that you could do this differently. It's a beautiful thing, because at the end of that, you're going to be so much better. You're going to make more money. You're going to make more impact. You're going to help your clients at a higher level. All those things. So, I have to tape a call on mine. So I'll send it to I did get threatened by my coach. I forgot to do one to tape one of my calls. And he's like, he knows I love cigars. So he's like, I'm going to put one of those cigars out on you, because you didn't do it. But I'll tape a call, and he'll listen to it. And say, hey, this is what you need to do. And I do the same thing with my clients. I'm like, tape the call. I will listen to it and see if I can dial that in. Because, we all have misses. We all, I had a miss on one of my clients that I was talking to. He absolutely should take me up on coaching. Absolutely should take me up on coaching. And most time I'm trying to disqualify people, really, because that's the best way to do it, because there's so many people I shouldn't take under my wing coaching, because they're just not there. They're not ready. They're not the right fit. And I think we both, I'm sure, taken over clients we should not have taken. We go, you know what? We should have never taken that client on. But I had a client where they were all almost like in, all right, I've been listening to your stuff. You've been doing, he may listen to this later and go, oh man, I know who you're talking about. You're talking about me. And he's like, oh, let's jump on a call. And then lo and behold, even though I teach against this stuff, I made a mistake. And I realized it kind of at the end of it, but I really realized it as especially as he did not sign up with me. He should have, he needed it. He would absolutely grow from the coaching. I know it. We track. However, I didn't get in his pain. I didn't, it was just all just riding the wave of what he was saying. And I didn't really get into some of the heart of what was going on and dial that in the way I should have. And that was a mess.
Conversations are so good that we forget to close.
What's that?
I said, sometimes our conversations are so good with the prospect that we forget to close.
Yeah.
Like it happens to me once in a while too, where I'm like, oh, this is definitely, we're vibing.
Yeah.
And then, you get to the end, and then you're just like, oh man, like I needed to treat it like a proper game. Like just because we're ahead at halftime doesn't mean that we're winning the game. And I feel it, and it's okay. I need to, one of the most important things that I think you and I do, I can tell you do it, is to not go too long without taking calls at your client. Making the calls, taking the calls, jumping in. I used to have field days where I would call the manager and I'd be like, hey, I got like 2 or 3 hours today. I'm going to swing by. I'm like, set me up at a desk. And he'd be like, all right, cool, come on in. And it would be a secret. And I just walk in and I just sit in that cubicle, man. And I'd be like, send them over. And I just start cranking, because if you're not showing your students or your client, your homies, that you made a mistake, you rebounded from it, you did it, you closed, you're practicing what you preach, there's a little bit of, you lose a respect factor from the team. Like, let me see you do it. So usually before we get that point, like we step in, like, of course, I'll just do it. And the cool thing about doing that is I don't know about you, but I tend to have a very high closing ratio because commission is the last thing on my mind.
Right.
I don't even get paid by this company that way, right? All I'm trying to do is, with conviction, prove that what we practice works,
Right.
and so forth. The other thing I noticed from some of the management that I've worked with is they made the same mistake I was making as a director, and that they were trying to teach everybody how they close instead of understanding consumer psychology, consumer behavior, and then creating a catch-all approach that you could apply to any personality, to any DNA, to any experience level, and sort of create this hybrid. Everybody should be their own hybrid. So those are the couple of things that, branching off of what you were just talking about, the mistakes we make, the things that we oversee, the assumptions that we make too early sometimes. I was talking to Brad Lee, and also on, what was a School of Wealth, or Wealth School, what's his name? Rondi, you know who Rondi Lambeth is? Really, really cool guy. You should look him up. He's in Vegas, or he was in Vegas. I think he's in Utah now. And they were talking about confidence. And I'm like, be careful preaching about confidence, because confidence doesn't always lead to conversion. Doesn't always lead to conversion. I'm like, effective conversations lead to conversion. Effective community lead to conversion.
I was confident in my conversation. It sure did not lead to.
It doesn't always lead to conversion. And then so you have these sales agents that come into your office at the end of the day, like, oh man, I had like 4 great conversations. I really bonded with the wife, like talking to them tomorrow. So did you lock them in? No. They just want to, I'm just going to call them tomorrow because she had to go to work. I'm like, okay, bro. Like, I'm glad you're having great conversations. What you need to have is great conversion, and so forth. And then I can't really say much because I'm like, I've done all this wrong at some point in my career. I've done all of this wrong. And it's just that exponential learning, being honest with yourself as a mentor, knowing that just because you created something doesn't mean you should stay romantic about it, and learning at 100 times the rate of the market. It was crucial for guys like you and I to connect, to share our ideas, to learn, to study, to stay ahead of the curve, because, that's the promise that we make. That's the promise that we make. Yeah. Maybe I'll come out there to Lexington sometime, man, and do some squats with you.
There you go. Yeah.
I'm not sure if I can squat as much as you, but.
Come on out, man. I tell you, blown away by this conversation. I don't know how we're going to collaborate, what we're going to do, but we're going to do something for sure. So I definitely want to link back up with you. And
you've got a book coming out. You've got some tools coming out. I have some stuff coming out, and I'll tell you what I'm doing. This is for the audience too. We all need to go digital. We can't be flying around and moving around, and there's only one of us, each. So we need to go digital. I'm building an online school and academy. You know, I'm probably going to go through Lightspeed for it and make it, you know, proper. But more important to me, I noticed this year, is I need to immediately start bringing in other mentors into the academy and giving their perspective on whatever their strengths are and add more value that way. So we can always collaborate, you know, and get together, or if we're not traveling, at least, you know, you're welcome to reach out to me. I'll reach out to you. You know, if there's any way I can help you or anyone in your audience, and the other way around, you know, if I get a phone call or an email from somebody out there, you know, I'll be like, yeah, I know somebody that, you know, that can stop by for you.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, how do we contact you? You know, for the audience out there, where they find you, where's your platforms, all that?
Yeah, I mean, if, you know, when you guys, you know, do put this up, you know, I know if you have a young show, these things tend to grow fast, you know, when you have great conversations. But it's just Joe Semaan. We'll put the spelling down there later. My Instagram is Joe Coach. Very simple. LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, websites, email. Hell, if you scream loud enough, I'll probably hear you these days. I don't know. You know, but man, good times, man. I'm glad we met, and I hope we get to do this again.
Absolutely. Well, guys, you know the drill. Go to hirescoaching.com. You know, hop on a call, download a free business transformation playbook, but definitely link up with Joe, Joe Coach, on Instagram. You know, he's a high level guy. Watch him, listen to him. If you like what he says, see if there's any way that he can provide value to you. If there's products he has out there, continue to grow, people. That's a whole mind. That's a whole you know, just mind shift that you need to have. And always, no matter what the flow of the business is happening now, you have to continuously grow and be prepared for the dip. Because when the dip happens, that's when you rise up if you're doing everything you need. And that's when the other ones go out of business, but you take more market share. So keep taking more market share, keep crushing your competition. Remember, limited risk equals limited income.